Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Russian armed forces are massing on Ukraine's borders. America should act and set an example. With Joe Biden settling into office, it seems Vladimir Putin is testing the new administration. Appeasement is no longer an option. On October 22, 2012, Barack Obama was in his pomp, mocking Mitt Romney in a televised election debate. When you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia. The 1980s are calling to ask for their foreign policy back. The Cold War's been over for 20 years. The imminent victor of that election contest could afford to mock his opponent, but it's fair to say time has been rather less kind to the Joker than to his target on this particular topic. Unfortunately, it seems Vladimir Putin had access to CBS to watch the debate, and drew the pretty clear lesson that the United States was not concerned about an imperialist and adventurous threat from Moscow. A little over a year on from Obama's wisecracks about the Cold War and 1980s foreign policy, Ukraine's Russian-backed dictator began violently trying to stamp out street protests against his corrupt government. By February 2014, the Russian troops he had been so certain weren't a geopolitical threat were in Ukrainian territory, seizing government buildings and annexing land. 7 years on, the Ukrainian war rumbles on, with an accompanying toll of death and human misery. The persistence of a land war in Europe is such an inconvenience to the authorities and powers who like to see themselves as preventing such conflicts that most of the time everyone agrees to simply look the other way and pretend it is not happening. For the Obama administration, Putin began as a low-priority threat and ended up as an embarrassment whom they had allowed to outmaneuver them, not only in Ukraine, but also in Syria. For Donald Trump, Putin was someone to variously suck up to or excuse, even to the point of suggesting that his own country's policies were somehow equivalent to those of that murderous thug state. The US is not the only power to badly drop the ball with regard to Putin, of course. The EU's policy towards this menace has long been hamstrung by egotistical naivety in Paris and financial self-interest in Berlin. Emmanuel Macron's trust-building dialogue with the Kremlin and Angela Merkel's dedication to the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline seem immune to the grim evidence of events. The EU Commission's failures on coronavirus vaccine supplies have made the situation worse. Several member states have struck deals with Russia for supplies of the Sputnik V vaccine, handing money and influence to a state that ought to be a pariah. Germany is the latest to enter talks, with the state of Bavaria having already placed an order for 2.5 million doses. Disarray in Brussels spells opportunity for Moscow, and the supply of that, at least, is plentiful. Ukraine has already paid a heavy price for the failure of 2 successive American presidents to contain Moscow's ambitions. So did our own country, including when British citizens were murdered in the shooting down of MH17, and when Russian agents deployed chemical weapons against civilians on the streets of Salisbury in March 2018. Events far away have a nasty tendency of swiftly getting close to home. The butcher's bill will grow more bloody yet. Russian armed forces are massing on Ukraine's borders and within hijacked Ukrainian territory, yet again, and the Kremlin spin machine is hyping up the supposed threat posed by a neighbor which it chose to invade. What did we expect? What lesson was Putin meant to learn when Obama was mocking anyone who suggested Russia was a threat? When the whole world watched Russian soldiers hijack Crimea and did nothing, is it surprising that he drew the conclusion that he could repeat the trick with no consequences? When the West agrees to sanction a thug state that exports Novichok to an English county town, and to stand with Ukraine against Russian aggression, but then Germany comes knocking to buy vaccines from the same regime, what message is being sent about the value placed on shared principles and mutual defense? Ursula von der Leyen has lost the authority to restrain her members from breaking ranks, if she ever had it, while supposedly responsible powers like France and Germany are unwilling to restrain themselves from doing so. So again we must look to Washington for a clear and uncompromising example. It's no coincidence that all this, Russia's velvet glove vaccine diplomacy to the EU and iron fist military threat to Ukraine, is happening right now. With a new US president settling into office, the Kremlin wishes to probe Washington, to see if there is any backbone holding up NATO, or the Western alliance more generally. The Biden administration is being tested, and we know from bitter experience exactly what happens if the US fails. Appeasement is not a safe policy, or a cautious approach, or a cost-free deferral of a difficult question. Far from it. If America is found wanting again, we will all come to regret it. If you like this video, hit the notification button for more news. Thank you for watching.